Rivers overflowed their banks, and lakes expanded, but inside the ark there was peace. As a sign of this everlasting covenant, God set a rainbow in the sky. Noah then sent out a dove. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. In the ancient days of the earth, when mankind was still young and the world was lush with life, humanity began to lose its way. The descendants of Adam and Eve spread across the land, building cities, establishing communities, and multiplying in number. But as they grew in population, they also grew in sin. People began to turn away from the Creator who had made them, indulging in violence, corruption, and selfishness. The world, once pure and harmonious, was now marred by greed, hatred, and immorality. God, who had lovingly formed the world and humanity, looked down upon his creation and saw how far it had fallen. The earth was filled with wickedness, and the thoughts of men and women were evil continually. God grieved over the state of humanity, for the people had forsaken his ways. The harmony that he had intended for creation was lost, and in its place, chaos and destruction reigned. The Bible tells us in Genesis 6:5, "The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time." Corruption spread like a plague across the earth, affecting not only individuals, but entire communities. Families turned against one another, violence became commonplace, and the land itself was defiled by human sin. People exploited the resources of the earth, abusing animals and each other, with no regard for the natural balance that God had intended. Society, driven by selfish desires, crumbled under the weight of its own iniquity. As God looked upon the earth, his heart was filled with sorrow. The creation that he had once declared good had been spoiled by mankind's actions. The bond between God and humanity, which was meant to be one of love and obedience, had been severed. God, in his justice, decided that the only way to restore the balance of his creation was to cleanse the earth. He would send a great flood to wash away the corruption and evil, giving the world a chance to start anew. But even in his judgment, God's love and mercy remained. He saw that there was still one man who walked in righteousness, Noah. In the midst of the world's wickedness, Noah stood out as a man of integrity and faith. He lived a blameless life and remained obedient to God's commands, even when those around him turned away from the truth. Noah's faithfulness did not go unnoticed by God. It was through Noah that God would preserve life on earth. God spoke to Noah, revealing his plan to bring judgment upon the world. He told Noah that he was going to send a great flood that would destroy all life on earth, wiping away the corruption that had overtaken it. But Noah and his family would be spared. God instructed Noah to build a great ark, a massive vessel that would carry his family and two of every kind of living creature through the flood. The ark would be their refuge, their salvation from the waters of destruction. Imagine how overwhelming this must have been for Noah. He lived in a land far from any sea, and the concept of a global flood was beyond anything he or anyone in his generation had ever experienced. Yet Noah did not question God's command. His faith was absolute. God provided specific instructions for the construction of the ark, its dimensions, the materials to be used, and how it should be built. The ark was to be 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high, with 3 decks inside. It was to be made of gopher wood and sealed with pitch, a natural waterproofing substance, to ensure that it could withstand the floodwaters. Despite the enormity of the task before him, Noah did not hesitate. He knew that God's wisdom was far greater than his own, and that obedience to God's will was the only path forward. With unwavering faith, Noah set to work. He and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, began the long and arduous process of building the ark. Day after day, they cut down trees, shaped the wood, and assembled the massive structure piece by piece. The work was physically demanding and slow, but Noah remained steadfast in his commitment to God's plan. As the ark slowly took shape, the people around Noah must have watched with bewilderment. To them, the idea of a flood that would cover the earth must have seemed ridiculous. There was no sign of rain, no storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Life continued as usual for the people of Noah's generation, and they likely mocked Noah for what they saw as a foolish and unnecessary project. Noah, known as a preacher of righteousness, must have warned his neighbors about the coming judgment. He must have urged them to repent of their sins and turn back to God before it was too late. But his warnings fell on deaf ears. The people of his time were too consumed by their own wickedness to heed his words. They continued to live in darkness, indulging in sin and ignoring the signs of God's displeasure. Despite the ridicule and doubt that surrounded him, Noah's faith never wavered. He did not seek validation from the world around him. His eyes were fixed solely on God. Noah's perseverance in the face of such opposition is a powerful testament to the strength of his faith. He understood that obedience to God was more important than the approval of men. As the ark neared completion, Noah's faith must have grown even stronger, knowing that he was fulfilling the purpose God had given him. When the ark was finally finished, God gave Noah further instructions. He was to gather enough food to sustain his family and the animals during their time aboard the ark. Then came one of the most miraculous moments in the story: the arrival of the animals. God commanded Noah to bring 2 of every kind of animal, male and female, onto the ark, and 7 pairs of every clean animal suitable for sacrifice. Noah did not have to seek out these animals. God brought them to him. Imagine the awe Noah must have felt as he watched the animals arrive. Creatures of all kinds, from the largest elephants to the smallest insects, came to the ark, guided by God's hand. Lions, tigers, eagles, doves, sheep, and snakes all walked, flew, or crawled toward the ark, understanding that this was their only chance for survival. The scene must have been incredible. Animals that would normally be predator and prey entered the ark peacefully, knowing that they were under God's protection. Once all the animals were aboard, Noah and his family, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives entered the ark as well. It was just 8 people who would carry the hope of humanity forward. Then, something extraordinary happened. The door of the ark was shut, but it was not Noah who closed it. The Bible tells us that God himself shut the door. This act symbolized the finality of God's judgment. The outside world was about to face the full force of the flood, but those inside the ark were safe. Then, the rain began to fall. At first, it may have seemed like an ordinary storm, but soon it became clear that this was no ordinary rain. The heavens opened, and torrents of water poured down from the sky. The ground itself erupted with water as the springs of the deep burst forth, flooding the earth from below. Rivers overflowed their banks, and lakes expanded, merging into a vast, unstoppable flood. Within days, the waters rose higher and higher, submerging valleys, hills, and eventually the tallest mountains. The flood was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was a total, all-encompassing judgment washing away everything in its path. People scrambled to higher ground, but there was no escape. The water covered everything: homes, cities, farms, and forests. The entire earth was submerged, and all life that was not aboard the ark perished. For 40 days and 40 nights, the rain continued without ceasing. But inside the ark, there was peace. While the storm raged outside, Noah, his family, and the animals were safe, carried above the destruction. As the ark floated on the endless waters, Noah must have felt a mixture of emotions. He knew that the world outside had been wiped away, but he also knew that God had chosen to save him and his family. The ark had become a sanctuary, a place of refuge in the midst of the chaos. For 150 days, the floodwaters remained high, and the ark drifted across the vast, empty sea. Imagine the isolation and uncertainty that Noah and his family must have felt during this time. They were the last remaining humans on Earth, cut off from the rest of the world, with no way of knowing when the flood would end. The silence outside must have been eerie, a reminder of the destruction that had taken place. Inside the ark, life continued. Noah and his family tended to the animals, ensuring they had enough food and water. The noise inside the ark must have been overwhelming at times, with the sounds of animals calling out, birds chirping, and the creaking of the wooden ship as it was tossed by the waves. The air would have been thick with the smell of so many creatures living in close quarters. It was not an easy life, but it was a life that had been spared. Noah's faith during this time must have been tested in ways he could not have imagined. He had trusted in God's promise to send the flood, and now he had to trust in God's promise to end it. There must have been moments of doubt, moments when the waiting seemed endless and the isolation unbearable. But through it all, Noah remained faithful. He understood that God's timing was perfect, and he trusted that God would deliver him and his family safely through the trial. After months of waiting, the floodwaters began to recede. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, but Noah did not rush to leave the ship. He waited patiently for God's signal. After 40 days, Noah sent out a raven to see if the land had dried, but the raven returned, finding no place to rest. Noah then sent out a dove, but it too found no dry ground and returned to the ark. 7 days later, Noah sent the dove out again, and this time it returned with an olive leaf in its beak, a symbol of new life, a sign that the waters had receded and that the earth was beginning to renew itself. The olive leaf was a powerful symbol of hope for Noah and his family. It signified that the flood was truly over and that the world outside was ready to begin again. 7 days later, Noah sent the dove out once more, and this time it did not return. The earth was dry, and the time had come to leave the ark. God spoke to Noah, telling him that it was time for him and his family to step out onto the new earth. With hearts full of gratitude, Noah, his family, and all the animals emerged from the ark. They stepped onto dry land for the first time in over a year. The world they saw was new and fresh, cleansed by the flood. The land was no longer marked by sin and corruption. It had been purified by the waters. The first thing Noah did upon leaving the ark was to build an altar to the Lord. He offered sacrifices from the clean animals and birds that had been saved, giving thanks for the protection and mercy that God had shown him and his family. This act of worship was a deeply significant moment, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the relationship between God and humanity. God was pleased with Noah's offering, and he made a covenant with Noah and all of creation. He promised that never again would he destroy the earth with a flood. As a sign of this everlasting covenant, God set a rainbow in the sky. The rainbow became a symbol of hope, a reminder of God's mercy and faithfulness. It was a promise that, despite the judgment that had come upon the earth, God's love for His creation would endure. The rainbow was not just a sign for Noah and his family. It was a sign for all future generations. It was a reminder that no matter how great the storm, God's promises are always true. The flood had been a time of judgment, but it was also a time of renewal, a time when the earth was given a second chance to flourish in righteousness. Noah and his family were given the responsibility of repopulating the earth, of rebuilding civilization from the ground up. They were tasked with the sacred duty of ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated, that the new world they were creating would be one of righteousness and harmony with God. Noah's family became the ancestors of all future generations, carrying forward the legacy of faith, obedience, and trust in God. For the rest of his life, Noah lived in the knowledge that he had been chosen by God to be the instrument of humanity's survival. His faith, obedience, and perseverance had saved not only his own life, but also the lives of his family and the creatures of the earth. His story became a powerful example for future generations of what it means to walk with God, to trust in His plan, and to remain faithful even in the face of overwhelming challenges. The story of Noah's Ark is not just a tale of survival. It is a story of faith, judgment, and redemption. It teaches us that even in the darkest of times, there is hope for those who trust in God. The Ark, with its towering walls and sealed door, became a symbol of God's protection and grace, a promise that no matter how great the storm, those who walk with God will be saved. Today, the story of Noah's Ark continues to inspire people of all faiths. It reminds us that no matter what storms we face in life, God is with us. His promises endure, and His love for humanity remains steadfast. The rainbow is a reminder that after the darkest storm, there is always hope, renewal, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soulful Bible Stories for more amazing Bible stories.